The biggest buzz at London Marathon this year wasn't just the racing, it was around Nomio. It's a performance shot used by athletes like Hocker and Mantz. Nomio is used before their key sessions and races, whether it's breaking the American marathon record or getting a world championship gold in Tokyo. What's also interesting is how widely it's being adopted, because it's not just by established elites. Emerging talents like Sam Ruth, the 16-year-old prodigy, swears by the product and is already making waves. Check it out for yourself at drinknomio.com, and if you're in Australia or New Zealand, you can find it at Aid Station and The Running Company.
Your skin can bring you so much pain. Now I hear you say you got the best of both ways. Won't you come and take a walk in my shoes and tell me if you take my place?
All right, this weekend on the Inside Run podcast, very, very special interview. We've got the Pathways and Transitions Manager from Australian Athletics, the founder of Team Tempo. He's been a team coach at the Olympics, World Championships, Com Games, and World Cross Country. He's also the coach of both Australian record holders over the marathon, Jess Stenson, who ran 2:21.25 in December last year, and Haftu Strintzos, who ran 2:06.20 just last weekend at the Gold Coast Marathon. I would say welcome back to the Inside Running podcast, Adam Didyk, but last time we did this was 2017 and the podcast was called Tell Me Your Tales at the time. But thank you for giving up some time and welcome to the Inside Running podcast.
Thanks, Brady. Yeah, I fondly remember that interview, and it's been great to sort of watch the surge of interest your interviewing has had over the years to get it to where it is now.
Hey, thanks for getting up some time. We were talking on the weekly show last night about how you very easily could have declined this interview and said, hey, I've got all the secrets. I've got both the national records. I don't need to be telling 30, 40,000 people all my kind of tricks of the trade. So, we appreciate you giving up some time for us.
No problems. I mean, from my perspective, my headspace is in the way of how do we help coaches and athletes in Australia, irrespective of whether I coach them or not. So if anything I've got to say can be useful to others, then more than happy to share it.
Hey, let's go back to last Sunday. Does it feel like it was a couple of months ago now? Like the world moves pretty quick. It was only 9 days ago, but a massive success for Haftu up at the Gold Coast.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, I wouldn't say it's moved fast. It's you just get back into your daily life. And so, they're the sort of things you go and plan for. And to say surprised would be probably not accurate, but just, really happy for him that he could execute on the day and achieve that performance. But certainly something he and I both sort of recognise as possible. So I still remember fondly on the finish line, thinking, oh, maybe I should have got down the road a little bit and given him a yell. This is going to get kind of close. And a couple of the guys that have been helping with the elite athletes looked at me and said, do you think he'll get it? I said, I'm not sure. It's getting pretty close. I'm feeling a bit guilty sitting here after eating croissants and drinking coffee. But, when he crossed the line under the record, I looked at him and said, I feel okay about the coffee and croissants now. But if he missed it by a couple of seconds, I would have felt like I probably could have had a purpose up the course a little bit.
Yeah, what does your morning look like? Like, are you getting there? Like, I'm sure you're up early. Like, do you see him hours before? Because it's an early start at the Gold Coast. Like, you got the 3 o'clock alarm set as well?
Yeah. It was, I think, 4 o'clock for a 4:20 shuttle. I just get up, get dressed, and go downstairs to the shuttles and meet him there. He's big enough to go and eat his breakfast by himself, doesn't need me holding his hand. And for a coach, it's not that you don't sleep the night before because of nerves, because it's not really the case. It's more the case of I'm worried about missing the bus in the morning. So I had a pretty rotten sleep the night before and just got up, had my my little can of Boss coffee and just got on with it. But it's no different to any other race day. You're just ensuring that any logistics need to be taken care of are taken care of. But by race morning, all of that's pretty well set. So, and when you go to races like the Gold Coast, the coordination's so good that it's not really something that's too much of a concern.
Yeah. And how early out did you guys circle, say, Gold Coast? I felt like it was a surprise, maybe not for you because you know it was data kind of leading in, but for a lot of people to see a performance like that in Australia, like we're so used to seeing people head to Valencia or Fukuoka or, target at Berlin or whatever it is. So, when did you decide on the Gold Coast that could be the best place for him?
Yeah, look, to be honest, the race options that we were searching for were not really happening. The event organisers were not overly supportive of Haftu coming, and it was for no other reason than his times just weren't fast enough. And then we had the intention of having Isaac Hayne debut in Gold Coast as well. So we sort of brought it back to scale and thought, okay, well, we can be confident that the pace will be good if the two boys are running well together. And we know that Gold Coast is a fast course. I mean, I've taken runners there for years and recognise it's flat. There's absolutely no reason why you can't run fast in that course. I think the only challenge you have is whether the wind picks up or the temperature's a bit warmer than what's seasonal at the time. And we prepared for those factors regardless. And then as the race built up, I mean, I was pretty comfortable telling other coaches that we were going to be doing it with the hope that more athletes would jump on board. But I don't see any reason why people can't run fast in Australia. It's a great place and all the rest of it. But the other part of it was we obviously had a few misses with races overseas. The first marathon Haftu went to, and you may ask me about this later, but I'll jump to it now. I was in Hamburg, and he trained in Font-Romeu, did a stint of altitude, and everything was going really well. But then a week out, he just got an acute onset knee issue, which we couldn't settle down because you can't even get access to anti-inflammatories in France without a prescription, and we didn't have access to those things there. So it was a bit of a disruption there, and he still lined up and still was on an amazing pace at 20k, but just couldn't finish off because the pain was too much. Then obviously Sydney fell into place where it did, and then Valencia Haftu pretty much got off the plane and was sick within a day or two. So we just basically decided, let's just minimise the complications. Let's minimise the risk of travel, associated illness, not having to manage injuries. Let's just keep it really straightforward and simple in an environment that we can have a fair bit more control over and, run at the Gold Coast. It suited the timeline perfectly and gave us a bit more time after World Cross, which didn't quite go to plan for him.
Yeah, there's something in that for sure. Like I've traveled the world running marathons at, a much slower pace than Haftu, but it's trying to get on the time zones and your food and being away from your family. Like all these things might only be 2 or 5% here or there, but you chuck 3 or 4 of them in the equation and you're 10 or 15% off.
Yeah, and look, it wasn't that we didn't have starts in other races. It just wasn't going to offer the environment we needed for him to do what he needed to do. Whereas the race organisers in Australia, Ryan McDonald, who handles the elite at the Gold Coast, is outstanding. Tim Crosby in Melbourne, phenomenal support that they offer Australian athletes. And now Ben St. Lawrence is sort of really assisting the Australian athletes for Sydney. Why wouldn't you want to run in Australia? You got such an advantage of home ground and being so well looked after. It matches more than what most international events can offer. Yeah.
And then the whole aspect of did you pitch it to Haftu that he can win this thing? Like, do you look at the field? Do you look at guys' PBs? That aspect of you're going to be racing for the win. That's going to help you find a few extra seconds, extra motivation.
Couldn't say we really cared about it too much at that point.
Okay.
It was more just, okay, what's the timeline? What's the preparation requirements? The preparation has to go well. Put yourself in that picture. We don't know who's going to enter. If someone enters who's significantly faster and better, what are you going to do about it? Not much. So you just got to go out and deliver your best. And with the field, when it got pulled together, that was a point where we thought, yeah, this is actually something you can compete for and win. But it was still just the purpose of it was to get a timeout, to be able to get invites into races where you could go faster. So the sub 210 was the initial aim. And then as we got closer and closer, the idea that he could run faster was fairly obvious and present.
Yeah. Let's talk about the training block. Like, you sent me through a document, password protected. We're just talking about it off air. I'm like, this is not that I've ever been involved at the very kind of top end of like coaching, but I was blown away when I opened this, Adam. Like, you said you've done some development to this document since then, but it was titled A Tale of Two Records, and you've kind of put all the stats from everything from cadence to training intensity distribution, the load that Jess and Haftu both kind of like undertook in the lead up to their marathon records. So this is, you've worked with one for, has Jess been 18 years? Did I read?
Yeah, 18 years.
And Haftu's kind of 2, but they've both ended up with national records under a very similar training approach.
Yeah, look, I mean, as I said to you just off air before, I mean, I've enjoyed playing around with AI to sort of do a lot of analysis and things like that. So it's not like I'm sitting there calculating all these numbers on my calculator. I've always been, someone who likes to control what I collect through spreadsheets and things like that. And that's why I've never gone to the training platforms and just had, autonomy over the spreadsheets and how I write training and things like that. And previously it was more for a case of efficiency. Now it's not. It's just something I've gotten comfortable with. But all of the analysis that you talk about is actually been more to learn for me. And when I sort of saw the strength of what I could pull out of some of the data that I sort of punch into these systems and what it gives back to me, it's I've learnt about my training approach a bit, which says a fair bit, but that's why I do it. I do it to challenge myself. And I see terms that come up, associated research, which I go and speak to physiologists about and say, give me a better understanding of this. And I think over the last sort of 12 to 18 months, I've sort of zoned in on a few things that are probably I find more relevant in marathon training and getting the right balance and how I prescribe and write it. But, there's a whole team behind this. There is a physiologist in each camp, dietitian in each camp, S&C coaches and the likes. And we all come together, collaborate and create a overall plan that sort of goes forward. So my role in coaching becomes more as a key collaborator and someone who, I guess, guides a team to get the best out of them. So, I'll go to a physiologist and I'll say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. I wouldn't mind doing a bit of altitude here, a bit of heat prep here. What are your thoughts? And then they'll say, well, look, the timing of this probably could be better a couple of weeks earlier. Let's separate this. And great. So I guess my responsibility in that is taking an initial plan and what we want to achieve and what I think we need to work on or what levers we could pull to enhance the performance. And theirs is to help me refine that to ensure that it's got the greatest chance of success. So, and I'll have to be pretty open in receiving that. There's no room for being fixed in your thinking when you're working with people. You've got to be open to bringing their ideas into it to help you enhance what you're doing. So I'm pretty fortunate. Certainly through being able to coach Jess, I've had access to some amazing people for a long, long time. And now I'm in a situation where I've got a new team of people. Some of them work within the program that I run at AA. And so great relationships to sort of be able to work collaboratively together.
Yeah. And like, how often, like, I know you got the lab data as well. Like, how often are they in the lab to get their zones? And is that like the starting point? Because it was very technical, like, yeah, this document that I'm talking about. I hope I could, it'd be good to be able to show a few more people. Hopefully you publish it one day. But that was kind of like the starting point. It's like, this is their thresholds. This is what their heart rates are at during different stages of the race. And then I was very surprised about the cadence stuff as well, how in depth you kind of went with the cadence and how much that picked up for both of them from like 30K onwards.
Yeah. Look, wow. Where do I start with it? Yeah. From some degree, the testing does assist a great deal, but I don't know that I necessarily have ever used them to guide the actual pace. Probably the goal race pace becomes more the generator of the pace aims, but the testing sort of reinforces where the heart rate should be and things like that. And I think what's been so powerful in the review process is now having race and I guess reasonably recent testing data, I've been able to sort of match up and sort of get a better understanding of how it connects with the race. For both of them, they only did one test in the lead up. We did one for Jess after she returned from Tokyo Marathon, where things were going pretty well. I believe, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, and it was more a case of, okay, how efficient are you currently at the pace we want you to become efficient at? And then if there was I guess, a bit of growth required, then we needed to work out how do we achieve that efficiency at the pace we want to go after a record type result. So that was really the idea. With Haftu, it was much the same. It was like, okay, let's get a bit of an understanding as to where you're at. Hadn't had the opportunity to do that. I mean, it's not that easy just to go and do a lab physiology test. So having them both supported by AA through the NAS program, we were able to get access to the VIS and SASI to do that. And those physiologists certainly do help me interpret and understand those things. I'm probably not ever someone who really cares about the VO2 max number. I've sort of said this to coaches in the past. I'm more interested in the lactate curve and where that sits and how efficient they are at the paces we want them to be. So they're the things I look at, and then I utilize that information to design some of those training sessions to sort of tease that out a little bit more. And, I guess, like I said, have a better understanding of where their limits are and what we need to grow from.
So that example with Jess about like, how do we make you more efficient at this pace we want you to be able to go a marathon at? Because she'll talk about doing a lot of her workouts at that 320 and then all of a sudden she's got to hold that for 42K. What's the answer? Like, is it more threshold work? Is it more mileage? Is it like, how did you pull that off?
I don't think there's one answer. I hate to complicate it, but I think it's just being patient and identifying what the needs are. So with Jess, we actually planned out that Valencia Marathon record attempt. Would have been 18 months beforehand. I was actually sitting in Peru after the Paris Olympics. Peru, because I was there as part of my role, AAs for World Under-20s. And funny enough, the person who was my roommate at that time was Bryce Anderson, who was the sports dietitian who actually traveled with Jess and Haftu to Valencia and was there the one screaming her on with a K to go. So he heard the conversation where I said, obviously came off the back of Paris. It was a good result, but there was this idea that she could run much faster. But where could we develop that opportunity? I said, I think we need about 18 months to develop you into someone who can really go for it. And my thoughts were still around how do we crack 220? That was the hope, to be able to put her in that situation. And I said, look, we need this period of time to build this part over the next 3 months. We need to build this part the following 6 months and go from there. So Tokyo was a good signpost that things were going in the right direction because she was largely on Australian record pace for probably 30K that day. And then just a few things in the last 10K meant that she just fell short of it. Sydney, I wasn't really too worried about the result. That was still, go and compete, go and support, really positive moment in Australian marathon running history, having that as a world marathon major, get it as a good part of your conditioning going forward. But we obviously had a bit of work to do in between to settle things and just get things right on track there. So volume, no, didn't really change much over that whole period of time. What we did focus on a lot more with Jess is just getting some of her sessions where she was above and below sort of race pace. And we do a lot more of this now than what we used to, where it might be, we built up from sort of 12 to 14 kilometres of 1 kilometre on, 1 kilometre off, to then 18 to 21 kilometres, 21 only because we got so close to a half marathon, we let her just continue on, but it was 20. And so building where we're sort of going below that race pace and knowing that we can come back and keep hitting below that race pace, knows that we're sort of getting that efficiency towards it. So that was probably the spine of the training. But it was that coupled with alternate weeks, pick up long runs, which were designed to challenge and stress the athletes in the latter stages of the long run. And, some of this was built off of early last year. We had Andy Jones, who was the physiologist for Sub 2 and worked on Breaking 4 with Faith Kipyegon. He happened to be in Adelaide in residence with SASI for a month and the university there. And so I managed to grab a coffee with him a couple of times. And what what sort of really stuck out as one idea that I wanted to flow on with, and we certainly tested this with Haftu in recent times, was physiological resilience. So it's not just, okay, we can do this test when someone's fresh, but what do they actually do under pressure when they're tired? And Andy and I sat there and talked about how do we actually get them back in the lab, get it all set up, calibrated, towards the end of a long run and do like a VO2 test. And he said he hadn't found that way to do that yet. And I was of a similar opinion. It would really disrupt things because you have to stop, set them up, all the tubes and all those sort of things that go with it. So I just looked at ways to challenge them in that latter stage to go, okay, well, how good is your physiological resilience? How much can you still produce a good output later in a run to match what you could do early in a run? And we specifically did this with Haftu in a few weeks out from Gold Coast. So I could talk to more of that later on if you like.
Now let's go there now. Because this is, I've got so many like rabbit holes I want to jump down. So let's jump down this one and we can close this off and go, because this long run, I feel like it's a developed thing in Australian distance running where it's gone from this like 2.5 hours time on feet and you're smashing yourself over shorter workouts to now it's like these long runs are quite meaty. I know in your document, I think I saw that Haftu had 11 long runs in between 29 and 38K. But do you have, before we jump into that specific one, but do you have a general rule that you go, okay, the marathon block is X amount of weeks and I want to have this many long runs over 30K in there?
Yeah, good question. Thanks for keeping me organised with my thinking. So the long run, I guess the marathon prep block, we look at it being about 10 weeks, with the last 2 weeks of that being a taper. So it's 2 4-week blocks that basically build on each other. So one thing I'm always really conscious of is what they enter that marathon period with. So I don't really care how well they're going before they're going into that marathon block. And if we, Isaac and I have reflected on this a fair bit, he was going really too damn well leading into his marathon block. And that was, he ended up being injured as we're starting the marathon block. So it was right at the start of that. But sorry
to interrupt though, but is there a criteria you want to tick off before that 10 weeks though? Like we kind of say that you want to do the work before doing the work. Like do you want people at least a 25K long run, or like are there some markers you're looking for?
Yeah. Don't want to have to build the volume too much by the time we get to marathon training.
Yeah.
But I'm not really too worried about the specifics.
Yeah.
So it's all pretty general sort of training. And it's just about ticking things off and ensuring that you get there healthy, with, I guess, relatively positive volume, but it doesn't have to be your peak volume for sure. We don't want to have to increase volume by 30% when we get to that point. So 10, 15, no worries. But like for, some of the volumes that they're doing, if we want to speak Ks a week, they might be 140 to 150K at that point, not 180. So, the pundits at home can do the calculations. I might be a bit off, but essentially we sort of then go into having the long runs where every second week in the marathon block is a specific marathon pickup run. So we don't do the higher intensity long runs every single week. They alternate. And we basically try to do 2.5 hours on the weeks where we're not doing a pickup. And when we're doing a pickup, it's probably about 2 hours to 2 hours 15 with some sessional elements to it. So that could be anything. And it's not really uniform. It depends on what the athlete's sort of progression is capable of. But, it might be, I know a few things we've sort of posted before is like 3 or 4 by 2K just at threshold pace with a kilometre in between, and then finishing off with 5K at the end at marathon pace. So when we sort of when we planned out for Haftu, his last one was going to be 3 by 3K at the end of the long run. And then when we sat there and looked at, we're actually going to be working that day because Haftu was in Adelaide with Clint Bellinger, who works with the university here as a physiologist. He wanted to use a device called a Moxie, which basically gets strapped to the leg and looks at oxygen saturation. And we sort of said, wouldn't it be interesting to collect some data at the start to then see what it's comparative with at the end? So instead of 3 by 3K, we basically warmed Haftu up. We tried to warm him up, but it was pretty damn cold that morning. And after about 15 minutes, he got into his race shoes, did a 3K at 3-minute K pace. His lactates were actually pretty high, and we figure it might have been from his fueling coming into that long run. And then we did 2x4K at the end, and which he was absolutely crushing that. And his results were much better there than it was, right at the start of the day. So, a few anomalies there to work through, but that's basically what we do with the long run. What we do with sessions is we go typically Tuesday, Friday. And so on the Friday where they don't have a sessional long run on the Sunday, so the Friday prior to just the general 2.5 hours, that will be a pretty long session. So it'll be fairly marathon specific.
Yeah.
And
have
then,
you got some like samples? What would we see on a program?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a little bit like I was saying before. It might be 1K on, 1K off for like 18, 20K, 2K on, 1K off. Just variations of that where we're playing around with going just sub marathon pace in the ons, and then the offs are not that slow. I mean, for Jess, it's much closer to her marathon pace. For Haftu, he's a pretty chilled character, and sometimes I have to say, okay, the offs could possibly be a bit faster, but it's sort of worked out okay for him regardless. So we've got two athletes who train quite differently as well. So their interpretation and execution of the training sessions can be kind of different, and that's why the way I give them their sessions can be a little bit different as well. But ultimately, that's really the flow of the training. The Tuesdays are pretty standard, 8 to 10K, might be just 1K reps, 2K reps, a couple of 4Ks, nothing really that exciting there. And on the Tuesday after they have the sessional long run on the Sunday, it's generally a pretty easy session. Okay. So that'll be like a 20-minute steady and then 4x1K at threshold pace. Yeah. And then the Friday,
and they roll into that Friday of the bigger one, don't they?
Yeah, and the Friday will generally only be like a fartlek, so it might be a monofartlek, for example, plus maybe 10 minutes tempo at the end of it. So we try to get some easy volume out, and any intensity is not of long duration on that Friday prior to the sessional long run, because they have to be fresh enough to do it. Otherwise, what's the point? That if we're sort of taking them in, they're smacked up every single time, then they're not really going to be able to get the specifics from it. So that's a big part of it, is protecting the long run. That's the key session, and then protecting the marathon specific session. So it's an alternate Friday, alternate Sundays that we do protect quite a bit.
I love that. We should put that on a hat. Protect the long run, like a nice camouflage kind of like hipster hat. We could sell heaps of these, Adam. Leave it with me. Leave that with me. We'll flick you some dollars from the merch sales. So is there any midweek long run at all, or is everything else just like, let's just fit as much jogging in as possible to recover in between?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, if we're talking about specifics, like Monday will generally be 2 runs. It might be an hour or 70 minutes in the morning, 40 or 50 in the afternoon. Wednesday will be generally 90 minutes to 2 hours. But if they're doing 90 minutes, it might be another half an hour in the afternoon. So they get, 2 hours plus of volume for the day. Thursday is generally 2 runs, again, similar to Monday. And then Saturday has probably been well noted now is a day off. I mean, I put on their optional 30 minutes, but I'm more than happy for them to have a complete day off on the Fridays. It does not bother me if they do a run on that day or not. I actually like seeing when athletes say, no, I chose the rest day today. And it was interesting because when we sort of designed the Tuesday, Friday, it was very different to what we previously did, which was, pretty standard for Australia. It was Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday sessions. And through COVID, we actually went to the 2 sessions a week, knowing we were going to have a fair bit of time. No point getting too carried away, risking injury. Let's just separate the sessions a bit more. We just found people recovered a lot better between those sessions. We could do a lot more in them. We could either dial up the intensity or dial up the volume, and know that we had enough time to recover. So that's how it worked. And the biggest positive out of it was people saying, I can actually take my partner out for brunch on Saturday because I don't have to do two runs that day, and actually had one day of the weekend which felt like a bit of a total rest day. So yeah, had no problems it being full rest. It doesn't bother me.
Well, you'd take someone like a Haftu. He seems to love those Saturdays, by the way. Lazy Saturdays, I think he called them. So, but you'd take someone who's got a good life balance and is happy and can string consistently 180K weeks together than someone who's trying to cram Ks, get up to 210, and they're broken and they're hating life and never get to take their partner out for brunch.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, look, there is a lot of a lot of stuff around just giving the body a full day rest. I mean, certainly we've looked at it as a bit of a way of, people have had repeat bone stress injuries going. It's just a full day where you offload. And, I'm as much about the athlete being happy and healthy as any training we put in. If they're not happy and healthy, then the reality is the training may not make the difference that we want it to. So, my bias in training is probably more from a psychological, emotional approach. That was sort of what I studied at university. Did a lot of psych study and stuff like that. So I'm very conscious of how stress builds up and impacts other elements like maintaining your training volume, injury exposure and things like that, and health. So I think it's important to kind of manage and promote a positive environment in that regard.
Yeah, and that empathy, like the things that Jess is dealing with outside of running and have to are completely different. Like juggling kids and partners, and the stress comes at you in different ways.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, it's very obvious to me that for Jess, when we returned her back to training, and looked at what her training volume was, it significantly down on what she was doing prior to having kids. And I said, your energy expenditure is going to be much greater as a parent. You're going to be running around after kids. You're going to have less sleep. You're not just going to be able to sit down. Not like Jess has ever been able to sit down, just put her feet up and watch a movie. It's just not her. Like, she would be reading textbooks and stuff when we're on training camp. So that's just, she doesn't like to sit still. But essentially, you've got to recognize that there's an energy expenditure beyond your running. And whilst we measure everything in running, life will have a very different take on things. Whereas Haftu is, pretty comfortable with sitting down doing nothing. When we set up Isaac to go do some training with Melbourne, he goes, he's going to be bored because I really don't do much. But he's certainly pretty damn good at getting the training done.
Let's have a quick break to talk about Nomio, because it's something that I've been looking into recently. The concept is pretty simple. You take it about 3 hours before a hard session or race. It's made from broccoli sprout juice, which contains an active substance called ITC. ITC has been shown to help reduce lactic acid buildup and oxidative stress during high intensity efforts. What's interesting isn't just that sessions can feel smoother, it's what happens over time. If you're able to handle hard workouts better and recover more consistently, you can stack quality sessions. And that's really where performance gains come from. Over the past year, we've seen many elite athletes start using it. Guys like Hocker, Connor Mantz, and Andreas Algren. Andreas, who has had a huge season last year with his triple European records. I was so intrigued by the research and the results of Nomio that I reached out to the team to learn more. And after trying it myself, I can only wonder about what part they played in all the records that were set at London Marathon this year. If you want to check it out yourself, it's at drinknomio.com. And if you're in Australia or New Zealand, you can find it at Aid Station and all over at the running company. Yeah. Are there any other things like outside the training that you think has contributed to these like 2 breakthroughs?
Look, I think it's just a healthy perspective. I mean, one of the things that I was most proud of Jess for actually stating after she broke the record was, she said, I knew that whether I did it or not, I was enough without it. And I feel like when there's a peace of mind where you accept that you've got an opportunity, but your whole life does not revolve around that opportunity, it's important. And I think Haftu and his story, it's been sort of well documented. But I mean, there's just a lot more to life than running. Running's just a part of it, and I think both of them embody that. Haftu is constantly looking for how we can explore opportunities as an electrical engineer. That's important to him as well. So I'm really appreciative of the fact that athletes have that sort of perspective. I think when you get to the level of obsession where you think you must be a full-time athlete and you must do it this way, you've got to find the right way for you. And I think both of them have found a good balance that's right for them. It just all sort of clicked. I mean, one of the things I'd say definitely is required is the ability to understand how to do your training. So, we've talked enough already about, okay, what we do, but I always say to coaches when I'm working with them, don't worry about what people do. Try to understand why they do it. And I guess that's a question you're asking now: is why do we do what we do? But ultimately, I think that's the important part. So, Jess has asked those questions over years, and there's a really good understanding. Haftu is really quite mature in his understanding of training and what works for him. And I've often had to listen to him and get feedback from him as to what works for him. And another one of my coaching sort of things I say is, you're as good as the feedback an athlete gives you. So if you don't have a good relationship where they can give you feedback around what training feels like, or how it's working, or what they like doing or don't like doing, or what they find challenging or easy, if you're not listening to that, then you're not adapting the program to suit what they actually want to do. And so, you can write an amazing program dialed in on all the scientific specifics and all the rest of it, but unless the athlete's giving you that feedback, it's really hard to tweak it. And the other part of that is, if you're just copying what someone else has done, or you heard someone's doing this and so you try to implement it, but you don't understand how it interacts with your training system, then when it's not working, you don't know how to tweak it. Or if it's not quite giving you the stimulus you want, you're not adjusting it to suit. So I think there are the key elements to it: the feedback the athlete gets and the understanding the coach has as to what they're writing and why they're doing it.
Yeah, well put. It feels weird to ask this next question because they've just had massive breakthroughs and set national records. But do you look at them and go, oh, there's still a weakness somewhere that we can tweak and we can find more time? Because when I'm watching Haftu dump the field at 30K and run the last, 11 or 12K solo, I'm thinking, oh, if there was someone in front of him for 9 of those Ks, it's got to be worth a couple of seconds here and there, and maybe as a 205 guy.
Absolutely. I think they can both run faster. I mean, and that's a brave call for Jess, knowing she's, not far from giving birth to a third child. But I think that's part of, performance coaching, is always looking for better ways, always looking for areas of improvement. And that's why we go through such detailed reviews to then go, okay, where can we find it? I mean, you've got different athletes at different stages of their career. I think Haftu's got a lot of improvement left in him. I think Jess, just given the stage of her career, and still definitely has some improvement. And I think she'll definitely push towards it. She's pretty driven to run faster and be more competitive than what she has been. But there's a bit to manage there too. So yeah, I think we're only scratching the surface with Haftu. Obviously, it's only, second year of marathoning. So, when he was missing things like Valencia and feeling really down about it, said, mate, look, Jess has been at this game for, 12 odd years, and she's broken Australian record. There's a bit of patience that sort of goes along with it. But I think we can sort of recognize Haftu's an extremely talented young guy, and even the guys who used to train at Villanova, reached out to me after he attempted marathons last year and ran well in Sydney and goes, it was just a matter of time. We saw this for years. It was just a matter of time before he goes to the marathon and does something that's really impressive. So I think the signs have been there for a long time. And likewise, Jess, I think we see someone who's just a really true marathoner. So she gets a lot out of herself, but her attributes are really true to marathoning. That physiological resilience is really true to marathoning. And so what if it doesn't show up in a 5K or a 10K or a half marathon? I've never really been attached to that idea that they need to be faster. They need to be fast times to be able to run a fast marathon. I think the marathon's its own beast, but we can certainly use them to guide us in how to develop that marathon. Yeah, is there room for greater efficiency for Jess? I think so. Some of the signs I saw in the lead up to Valencia showed that there's still room for improvement. And I think the way I saw her running into Paris was almost up on what I saw her doing leading into Valencia. So, there was no shock to me how well she ran in Paris because I saw some signs there that were just phenomenal and delivered good results on both occasions.
Jess has this amazing ability to sit really close to a LT2 for a marathon, doesn't she? Like when you compare it to Haftu's numbers, but they both execute very similar when you put them next to each other in that document. But she can sit very close to that, like not many other people.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a specific skill set. And I think the immeasurable part of Jess, and I certainly said this before, is she just has a way of managing herself and handling that tough part of a marathon better than most I've ever seen. And, she has a way of keeping a positive frame of mind or using the challenges to spur her on rather than to doubt herself. It's an interesting thing because I'm not sure if she's aware of how good she is at it either. And it may be the reason why she doesn't always talk about it. But as a coach, when I do reviews with her, yeah, she's one of a kind there, and she's quite brilliant. And that is the one thing that we know from a psych perspective, dealing with adversity late in a race is a key to having strong marathon performances, and she does that in an amazing way.
Yeah, it's kind of like the opposite of her personality. Like, she's so nice and friendly, but then she'll absolutely murder you in the last 3K of a marathon if you're anywhere near her. Like,
yeah. I still remember in the early stages of coaching her, and we ran City to Surf, and it's a story I know she's told where she got up in the middle of the night, hit her knee, and she could barely stretch her leg out when we woke up in the morning to go to the race. And she said, "I'll still warm up." And then even in the race, she agreed she'd do it. I saw her hobbling around the warm up, but even in the race, comes to Heartbreak Hill, and all these guys are flying past her. And rather than going, geez, I must be going backwards, which would probably be pretty typical for many athletes, she's going, oh, this is good. There's fast people. I can try to grab onto them, see what I can do with this situation. Yeah. And I'm sitting there going, I definitely didn't have the mental capabilities to process things in that way. So as I said, it's a kind of special element to her. And it's a hard one to measure. I can't put that one into a spreadsheet, but it's certainly very noticeable.
Yeah. How important has Bryce Anderson been over the last couple of years? Like, you mentioned him a couple of times, but we've seen this massive improvement in knowledge and fueling over the marathon. Less people are bonking. You got the shoes as well, which also make a bit of an impact. And he was a sub 14 minute 5K guy. Like, he's not just a nerd who's got the stats. He's been there himself.
Yeah, Bryce has been a critical part of our team with Haftu. I'll be honest and say we've worked with Liv Warnes at Sassy with Jess for a long time, but I think really where the credit comes to starting this trend of fueling, Louise Burke, who worked at the AOS for a long time as a researcher, did a lot of work with race walkers. And I'd say at the point when I was coaching Jess at the time, and what was it, 2019, I started coaching Jared Talent. And I was very exposed to the fueling that the race walkers did, which was so far ahead, like light years ahead of where we were at, or where we were being informed to go from a marathon perspective. And this was all because Louise did these amazing studies called the Supernova studies, which she brought athletes in, race walkers in from all around the world, really focused on it, provided some amazing funding to support that through research that she did. And we learned so much. So I learned from, being on the bike with Jared, taking care of all his fueling, to go, oh, hang on, there's so much more here we could be doing, Jess. We're a long way away from where they are. And Jess Rothwell was working as the nutrition lead at AA at the time, and she called me and said, what are your thoughts as to where we can get to, here from a marathon perspective? And I said, look, Jess, as you're aware, there's so much that the walkers have been doing, and we're a long way behind that. If we can influence the marathoners to start doing similar to what the race walkers are doing, we're going to have massive wins in that space. And so it's about doing the fueling during long runs and sessions, consistently training the gut to be able to tolerate high levels of nutrition and fueling during races. Then we're going to see it's the biggest win area. And so that started to come in. Bryce has certainly been sort of studying and learning along that pathway. But where I've worked primarily with Bryce is through the program we've got at AA in the pathway. He's our pathway nutrition lead. And obviously, before Haftu came on to NAS, I asked, could he support us with Haftu? And so he did. And it was such a benefit to Haftu, because those training sessions where we want fueling done, and they're largely done in those specific sessions where we're pushing some intensity, because you want to trial that at race intensities where possible. Bryce would get out on the bike. So, Haftu being in Melbourne, me being in Adelaide, I can't do that for him. And Bryce would jump out on the bike with Haftu and do his fueling. So he's been critical in that sense, but also just being a support to Haftu in some of those training areas where we want a few specifics taken care of. And Bryce obviously worked as performance specialist for us as well. So he had the ability to take some lactates when we needed it and stuff like that as well. So yeah, he's been awesome in that regard. And, going to Valencia last year, he was actually going to Europe a week later. And we sort of convinced him to go to Valencia and help out. Knowing I couldn't go, I felt a lot more confident knowing that I had someone there who had that experience to be able to support both Jess and Haftu in that environment.
Yeah, it's been a massive, and I know the race walkers as well, don't they dominate, or they have like the heat stuff as well? Like they've been ahead of their game in like the heat preparation. I think Bruce was talking about it after we went to Doha. It's like, no, the walkers have been doing this for years.
Yeah, and 100%. I mean, Brent Valance, sort of had a lot of support through the AIS. He definitely pushed the boundaries on some of those areas, but, through the approach he took was quite open to allowing that physiology influence. And he had some really good people there to support him. And as I said, you've got to be open to having that support, which he obviously was. And so the race walkers took on a lot of that specific preparation, which we're just starting to catch up and get better at in the marathon space. There are some differences between walks and marathon running, largely in the fact that, the gut doesn't bounce as much when you're walking as what it does running. So the discomfort around the gut tolerance is probably heightened. The other part of it is in race walks, they get access to fueling every 2 kilometers, whereas in marathon, that's not typical. It's every 5 kilometers. So even the research suggests if they could fuel marathoners more frequently, they wouldn't have to take so much on, and therefore could probably, on a whole take on more. But it's a comfort thing as well, and that's why you have to train it.
Yeah. Yep. Hey, Adam, our Patreon supporters are the most dialed in running fans in Australia and overseas, and we always are, well, not always, but we've been asking them, what questions have you got? So do you mind if I fire through a couple of these ones? They're a bit all over the place, but they're very well informed and big fans of the sport. This is a bit of a backstory to this. What is your coaching philosophy question is, Croaks asked Craig Mottram this, and Craig Mottram was not happy with the question because he thinks it's a stupid question. Actually, I've got it in the I've got it in our soundboard here. This is what happened when Croaks asked Craig.
Now that you're a coach, how would you describe your coaching philosophy?
That's a shit question. People ask me this all the time, and that is.
Come on, Croaks.
You explain to me what that question means.
All right.
So for you, Adam, what is your coaching philosophy?
Yeah, I'm not too dissimilar to Craig on this one. I don't. I think your philosophy changes as you go. So I think if you get locked into any one sort of philosophical approach, you might not allow yourself that growth. So I think anything that comes from my philosophy is around, constantly growing with the athletes as they perform. So that probably answers it to an extent. But I think it's more about looking at your coaching role. And I see that the athletes are actually the ones in control, and they choose whether they want to do the training I said or not. So, and if they don't want to do it, what am I going to do about it? So, the athlete, I've even done sessions with some of our junior athletes saying, the athlete is their own CEO, which was imparted on me by a cricket coach. Okay. And I like that idea. And that's why I feel like it's about working with the athletes. And from cycling, some of the cycling coaches, Brett Aitken was one that sort of shared this with me. We're not responsible for the performance. We're responsible for the environment that creates the performance. And I think that's another part of it for me is how do I create an environment where we can get the most out of the athlete? And that comes down to some of the stuff I've mentioned previously. How do I keep myself open to influence from people with better knowledge than me? And how do I keep myself open to learning from the athletes around what works best for them and receiving that feedback?
Yeah, okay. And on top of that, how much do you take from other sports? Like you just mentioned, Brett Aitken, his Bendigo boy, cyclist.
Yep.
I reckon Tim Decker's over your way too, isn't he? See Tim Decker? Yeah, he was a Bendigo boy as well.
Yeah, I've been pretty fortunate, being able to work out of Sassy where I get to interact with so many great coaches. And we've had opportunities where we've just come together. We had a group, Tim Decker involved, leading into the Paris Olympics, where we're talking about some of the challenges we have, and as coaches sort of helping each other through it. So yeah, I love talking to other coaches. I actually am really keen and interested in talking to coaches from other sports. I feel like in athletics, we probably present our own biases within our conversations, whereas some of the things that I've learned from other coaches is amazing. And I, again, like I said, I was fortunate to work in an AIS program where I had access to, aerial skiing coaches, mogul skiing coaches, and diving and all sorts of stuff. And I just loved it. I love talking to coaches, and some of the parts that are really specific to coaching is not the technical and the tactical. And that's the bit that I really enjoy growing from. I mean, not too many people start coaching without having much of an idea about the technical elements. I don't know how many people put their hand up going, I've got no idea about anything, but I'm going to coach you. So
Yeah.
I do feel that most people have already a background of information that allows them to put their hand up and say, I'll give this a go. So sitting around and talking about all the technical stuff, to me, isn't what I find interesting. It's talking about how they interacted with challenges that they faced with athletes, and that could be a range of things. But that's what I love about coaching, and really invested my time and effort into being that style of coach rather than just someone who's a guru on technical.
Is your bookshelf full of like sports biographies and like you love the old Netflix like sporting doco? Doesn't matter what sport it is.
Yeah, I'm looking at my bookshelf now. But to be completely transparent, I don't think I've read a book since my kids have been born. So
Parenting's hard, mate. Parenting is hard.
I'm too used to getting to the end of the day, sitting on a laptop all day long, reading and reading and reading, that it's not relaxing for me to read at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So my formal learning probably happened a lot through books. My learning over the last 12 years now, we'll call it, since my first son was born, has gone to conversations and experience. And I just feel that I value that so highly, that experiential learning. And I know now, like, how much I've grown over the last 10 years, and knowing how I even viewed coaching, viewed my role, interacted with athletes has changed significantly over that time. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't undervalue that. And in coaches, I often say to them, just keep coaching, like learn from coaching. You could go to all the courses you want. You can read all the books you want. You can listen to all the podcasts you want. But at the end of the day, you've actually just got to try to implement it and learn from that and keep reviewing what you're doing. I mean, I still sit down, write a training program, and I crash halfway through writing a training program, head in my hands going, what the hell am I even doing? I still question it every time. There's still a level of imposter syndrome that comes into all of that. And I don't mind that. From that perspective, that's me keeping myself on my toes and constantly questioning what I'm doing and how I could do it better. So that doesn't frighten me. That actually excites me that I still like that.
Yeah. Hey, Jake asked about data, and I'm interested in this one because of the correspondence, I guess, with Haftu. Like he says, we know that Adam loves his data. If you had access to every metric, so like HRV, lactate, chronic and acute load, what are your top metrics that actually influence your coaching decisions the most? Like Jess wears the ring, doesn't she? You get her data when she wakes up every morning?
Yeah. I mean, I still value a conversation with the athlete over anything.
Okay.
But it's good to have. I think that the data helps you to review and reflect accurately rather than just your perceptions. So there's definitely been some times where we have specifically leaned on the data to make decisions, but it's not all the time. I mean, have to hate me saying this, but I'm constantly nudging him a week later. Can you please upload your data?
Yeah.
So, but I know that I'm confident, I trust that if there's anything going wrong or anything that's not going to plan, he'll call me and we'll have a chat. So I don't stress out about those things, but it does allow me to keep my spreadsheets nice and neat and my charts, keep on going. And yeah, I do collect a number of those things. Geez, I'd love a live lactate monitor on athletes in a session. That would probably be my gold standard, but I don't think there's anything that exists that's of any note. But if anyone's got one and wants to throw me one to trial, I'm happy to use it with athletes, because that to me would be most interesting. But at the same time, I don't take lactates very often. I hate doing it as a coach. I know how to do it. It's just I want to focus on coaching, and I want to stay in tune with what I'm doing. And if I'm too focused on the logistics with grabbing blood and things like that, it just distracts me from my actual role out there in a training session. So if someone else can come and do it, great, but I don't care that much. I think the athlete will give you pretty much the same feedback as what the lactates will.
Yep. Hey, Rory asked about integrating cross-training. Like Jess famously ran that 225 in Perth off a whole lot of elliptical work. Is it something you do when you, like, I guess, need to as a bit of a last resort? Someone's coming off an injury, or you don't want to be pushing their mileage too much? Like, do you integrate it much?
Yeah, you do it when you need to. I'd rather run. But, there are different constraints that cause cross-training to be prominent in anyone's prep. Haftu doesn't cross-train, and I'm not intending on putting it into his training either. We've used it when we were returning him from the knee issue after Hamburg last year, but that's pretty much been it. Jess uses it a lot because she has kids running around, and it's not always easy to get out the door and go for a run, but it is manageable to jump on the elliptical in the shed and get some work done. And also just, it's a great option when someone's going, look, I'm a bit sore. I feel like I'm a bit unsure as to whether running's a good idea today. Let's trial on the elliptical and just offload a little bit like that. But I'm probably more to the extent of cross training is great when injured to keep above zero, in fitness. But I don't think you can achieve the same level of specificity in cross training. You could do exactly the same session physiologically, but you're missing out on the strength gains that you make from that plyometric element that you get out of running. So you cannot replace running with cross training, but you can certainly support your running program with cross training if there's certain elements that are breaking you down. And they're reasons to use it. But I still think running's the best form of training, obviously.
Yeah. Terry asks, and we kind of spoke about the training earlier in the chat, but were there any key sessions where you looked at the numbers for, both Jess and Haftu leading into their national records that you were like, we're on here? Like, I've got a big smile on my face seeing this get uploaded or see this happen in person.
Yeah, look, there was one session Haftu did a couple of weeks out that was in Adelaide, and it was 3 by 7K. And I rocked up a bit crook that day, so Lockie Scott jumped on the bike and helped him out a bit. But Haftu just sat comfortably on 3-minute Ks all day. And I was like, yeah, well, he's obviously fairly comfortable at that because it's at the end of a fairly big week of training. It was one of the last solid training sessions for him. And so if he was doing that under that fatigue, I knew that come race day when he freshened up, things were going to go pretty well. But I don't know that any one training session gives you that confidence, just knowing that things have been consistently done well. And I think that was definitely the story of Jess. Like there's never one standout session you go, oh, we're on. It's more a case of, no, she's hit every session at pretty much goal pace of what we've set for 6 or 8 weeks here. So, and I think what's so impressive about that is the ability to be able to recover, manage yourself, to be able to keep doing the sessions at that high caliber is the most impressive part. And that's a reason why I think when we look at any athlete of note or any performance, it doesn't come from one session here or there. It comes from consistent discipline to be able to manage yourself across a long period of time. So every time I see a great result from an athlete, enormous respect for them, because I know that hasn't come because I've just switched it on once or twice. It's time and time again, consistently delivering, and probably even well before that specific phase come into play.
Yeah. I know you're in like high performance, but for the rec runners out there, and Alex asks, what aspects of Adam's training for Jess, Haftu, and others in the group would he recommend for club runners looking to improve? What would he not recommend? And then like on top of that, what mistakes do you see that the rec runners potentially are making that you're like, oh, that's a bad idea?
Yeah, look, it's a different space, the rec running space, and I'm not going to suggest just because I've coached Haftu and Jess that I'm going to be good at giving information to that. It's the same as there are some junior coaches who are just so unbelievable, but their attributes don't lend themselves to high performance and vice versa. So I think we'll find our space for what we're going to be good at. I've tried the rec running coaching and I found it really challenging. But I think probably some of the key things, just keep it simple. I mean, obviously, you're training to run for a period of time. You've got to get comfortable and confident that you can run for that period of time. I think if in doubt, jog. Like you're always going to improve just by running. So you don't need to make it fancy and get overly complicated. And I think just, maintain the key thing that's going to help you to run well on the day is being healthy and injury free. So, like I said, if in doubt, jog, or if in doubt, cross train. Don't push through things. I think is probably the consistent message. But from a training perspective, just try to understand what your marathon pace feels like, and spend a bit of time exploring what that feels like in training.
Yeah. What about Tor wants to know double threshold? Yeah, you've tried it, experimented. It's a hype at the moment.
Have experimented with it. I think it's really difficult to get right. Again, it's a lot of control by the athlete, and I think that's why we see specific lactates taken from athletes. Look, I've seen good results with it. I've seen good results without it. I'm not sold that we need to do it just because other people do it well. I mean, I'm not really too interested about what other people do in that regard anyway. But we've certainly tried it. I did a bit with Matt Clark. And Isaac Haynes tried a bit of it as well. There was definitely some benefits that we saw from it, but I think just writing your training program, you can achieve similar loads. Just training one session on a specific day, and how you structure your week. So, yeah, I mean, definitely, if you're curious, give it a go. Don't see any harm in it.
What about Luke wants to know about the transition, 3 key things an athlete should focus on trying to convert a good 5 and 10K times into like a marathon. And Jake, additionally has, how do you decide when an athlete's ready to race a marathon? Versus needing additional time. You've kind of spoken about Isaac a few times, was set to debut. When do you sit back and go, okay, you're ready for this now? Because it's kind of the opposite in the rec running world. It's like, let's go straight to the marathon. You've been running for 6 months.
I think you're ready when you want to do it. If you don't want to do it, or then don't attempt it. But if you want to do it, then sometimes you've got to scratch that itch and find out. So I think I'm trying to get to the crux of the question. The conversion of 5K, 10K to marathon, as I sort of mentioned earlier, I'm not really massive advocate for saying you must run them well before you can move up. I think it depends on the stage in your career and how it fits into what you want to do. I think probably one of the biggest mistakes people make when they go certainly from a competitive 5, 10K run up to the marathon, they think they've got to go longer, harder, further. And I still recall pretty much the only thing we changed with Jess on her first marathon was we extended a long run. Everything else stayed exactly the same. And that's a far cry from where we are now, but that seemed to be pretty good for her at the time as well. So don't just rush to trying to do what you perceive marathon training looks like if you haven't sort of progressed to doing that. Like that might take a couple marathons or even a couple of years to get to where you want to get to. So if you want to go and explore the marathon before you're fully training developed to do it, that's fine. But it doesn't, you don't have to just straight away jump to doing, 180 kilometer weeks and things like that. I think you can do it off a fairly lower volume, and we sort of get that feedback even when people look at Haftu's training. I think he had one week up around 180 odd Ks, but there were a lot of weeks that weren't. Even Jess over the years, might get to about 170, but probably sits more 150 high, 160 through most of her marathon preps. So it's what you do with that volume. And that's why I don't think you need to just go further, longer, harder, smash out long 30-kilometer runs and those sorts of things. You can sort of just build that as you progress your running in a marathon. And that's partly the excitement of Haftu, because I still think there's a lot that we can build on there.
Yeah, and like Caitlin, I guess, as well. Like over there in Adelaide, she's 1 or 2 marathons in. These guys have got 10 more years of doing this stuff. It's exciting times ahead.
And Caitlin's marathon prep was not typical before Melbourne either. I mean, I guess we capitalised on a really good consistent block leading into Gold Coast half marathon, which allowed her to get away with a few hurdles that she faced in the marathon block. So again, it's relying on what came before, not just what you do in the lead up to, that sort of builds that strength. So, she's got a lot of room for improvement, Caitlin. I'm really looking forward to what her and Lockie can do in that space.
Yeah. Benny Saint sent this one in. And when I first saw it, I thought, oh, this is a cheeky plug for Sydney Marathon. But he's got a pretty good point here. How valuable was Sydney Marathon in Haftu's development as a marathoner? Financially, obviously a great choice, but also having access to a race of that caliber on the doorstep now must be great for developing our domestic marathoners. We've seen Australian marathon records broken by Jess late last year and now Haftu, who have both raced Sydney in 2025. Do you see this as a great way to take the strength built from a hilly marathon course into a faster course to chase times when planning longer term?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think it's just amazing for Australian running to have a world marathon major in Australia. And it was something that we actively wanted to support last year. I think in relation to what I said earlier, we've got such great opportunities here in Australia, and I'm pretty patriotic, I guess you'd say, towards things being positive for Australia, and this is one part of it. To keep building what we're doing, we need to invest in what we've got here, and that comes down to running the races here in Australia. Yes, definitely financial opportunities for our elite marathoners allows them to take the risks and set up for the following year. So as a coach of athletes who have a professional mindset, it's unavoidable to look at those opportunities and say, okay, you can pick up some good money here. So therefore it takes the pressure off. We can look at a training camp or whatever have you and take some time off the following year, 100%. And so I think that's of massive value. I haven't really thought too much about the idea of a hilly marathon leading into Australian records.
Put that in the AI, mate. Feed that in there.
Yeah. But I think, we needed to have to finish a marathon, and that provided that opportunity. And for him to be set up with pacemakers and the support and just to have that elite experience also gave him a recognition of some of the things that we could focus on, and allowing me to sort of see how he interacted was probably the biggest plus, because I couldn't go to Hamburg with him. I didn't go to Valencia. So seeing how he interacts in the days leading to the race is massive. I think with Jess, it actually it gave us a fair bit more work to do between Sydney and Valencia to get that right, because she was, hurting late in that race. So we had to really respect that, recover from it. But hey, there's always benefits from a hard run, right? It's just it's what you do to react to that afterwards. And we responded to it by giving her the opportunity to recover and then building her in. But she still got massive benefits from running, a pretty tough, marathon. So yeah, certainly I wouldn't say it had no effect. It just meant that we didn't have to rush back into training because she still got a good hard run under her belt.
Yeah. Hey, a last couple from me. I've got notes everywhere. I tried to hit as many of those Patreon questions as possible, but the pacing strategy, like in this document here, you've got a near perfect threshold marathon for Haftu, like opening at 40 beats per minute below max and drifting only 17 beats per minute over the 2 hours. Signals like an exceptional lactic clearance and aerobic durability. Does have to go out on that day and you're under instructions to keep his heart rate under a certain number, or is it just like you're just in the pack and and Jess nailed it as well with her heart rate data. Like they both got to, late in the race where they could, and we've had Dan Nash, an exercise physiologist on the show before, who's big on this, kind of like stay under this number until 30K and then rip the Band-Aid off kind of thing. Was that instructional for them?
I would say I doubt. I'd be pretty confident saying neither one of them would have looked at their heart rate for the whole race.
Yeah.
And this is where I say
so in tune
data is well, I mean, the data helps us to accurately reflect on what the situation was. And that's how it's used in this space. But ultimately, I think it is, you do learn how to execute a race. You do learn your pacing profiles. We were with Jess prior to Valencia, I sat in on the technical meeting and there was 2 pace groups, and, she was in a cafe with Bryce and Haftu the day before a race. And she said, we had a Teams meeting or WhatsApp or whatever we did, FaceTime, and basically, sort of opted. She said, so I guess I'll go out with the second group. And I said, you just call me when you get back to your room. She straight away knew that I wanted her to go with the faster group. And so she gave me that call and I said, well, you're capable of doing that. And there's certain evidence prior to that gives you that confidence. Like I said, in Tokyo, she was well on Australian record pace for 30Ks. I said, so what are we worried about here? get onto that pace. You're there to explore what you can do, not to play it safe. So give it a go. And again, in her training, we saw that she could do that. As I said to you before, Haftu was so comfortable at 3-minute Ks, and we saw that in his pickup long run and that 3x7K session. So why wouldn't we attempt to go and do it at 3-minute Ks? And the pacemaker was there. It was at 2:07. It was an obvious just to go with that and put in the lead pack. And I got asked this in the days leading in. So what's Haftu going to go? Is he going to go with the lead pacemaker? I said, yep. And it was as simple as that. And then it was a case of, okay, if you feel you've got some legs, you can go for it. And he did, and it worked out. So yeah, it's not just a blind, ego stab of, just go for the win and that sort of stuff. It's there's information behind that gives us confidence in that. I think what we saw from Haftu is maybe 2:07 pace is not fast enough. Maybe on that day it was, but there's certainly room where he can explore going at a faster pace, and seeing if he can hold a fast pace to the finish line. But my focus for him is not just about being able to run fast times, but in marathoning there's championship racing as well, and I think we need to give him exposure to championship style races as well, so that he learns how to close fast in a competitive race, and that's what we'll be looking at in the lead up to LA Olympics, to ensure that he gets there in a competitive sense, not just a guy who can run a fast time one off. And definitely what we've done with Jess in the past, where not in a pace-made race, championship race have been used to build on the next championship race. And we need athletes to learn how to close hard and be competitive, as opposed to just go off to Valencia, run fast, and that be it.
And like your structure with the marathon block and the taper, do you have something now that like Haftu is in a post-marathon protocol? This is where I think rec runners need to get a whole lot better, that a lot of them rush back. Like, I feel fine. Like, your marathon was 4 days ago. You're like, do you remember like a mile for a day for every mile? That was one back in the day, wasn't it?
Definitely used to use that mile for every day. That was imparted on me by Chris Wardlaw, who obviously coached many top marathoners. Yep. But I think now with the shoes, the 1 day per mile is probably less required. I used to see Jess when she would come back in the old school shoes, and she'd go, I'm feeling really bouncy. I think I'm ready to get back in my sessions. And I look at her and like, you're crushing that ground. You're hitting it like a brick. I said, it doesn't look like it to me. And so I think that proprioceptive sort of feedback gets impacted by the marathon. But I think with the shoes the way they are now, it doesn't get impacted as much, and they can bounce back much sooner. I mean, the protocol with Haftu is he likes to have a bit of a break after his race. So he went into 3 days of just really light jogging, and then he's just switched off for a week. And I spoke to him on the weekend, and he said, I feel like I might be able to get back into some structure this week. I said, well, see how you're going midweek or later in the week and give me a call, and we'll start putting some structure back into it. But honestly, if they're not feeling like they're ready to get running, then I'd rather them take the break. And if that ends up being 3-4 weeks, then we'll pick up where you're at. But, it's a whole thing I say is like, there's a psychological and emotional toll that comes with running a big performance, and you have to respect that. So until he's ready to get back into it, we won't. And I've offered the same to Jess. Sometimes she's wanted to get back for certain races, and I help to try to make that possible for her. But, all with perspective. We saw after Valencia, Haftu getting back for World Cross was just too tough. It was too short a timeline, and I sort of advised him of that prior to him accepting that spot. But, it is what it is. And, sometimes you've got to be optimistic and give yourself that opportunity. But, that's kind of the protocol. And I think might have been Michael Shelley who used to throw his shoes away after his last run, and it only crack a new pair when he wanted to start running again. So I think that was Michael Shelley that said that. But I don't mind that idea. Shouldn't be in a rush to get to the next race.
Yeah. Hey, with your Australian athletics hat on, do you, and with the coaching role there, this was a question I think Scott had written here. I didn't have it in the notes I sent you, but with the qualifications now, this is more so on the track, and so many points allocated to certain track meets. Do you think that's going to be a challenge for Australian athletes who are on the fringe and can't get starts in that top end Diamond League standard races?
It's always been a discussion since the world rankings points came into place, but I think at the end of the day, the people who are going to be competitive find a way of getting like the putting themselves in an eligibility position, whether that be through auto times or world ranking points. We don't have as many here in Australia as what some of the other meets do, but also we've got to be conscious of the fact that our summer, we've got an amazing meet in Melbourne, Murray Plant meet, that's given so many great opportunities. We've got Oceanias to take advantage of, which is nowhere near as competitive as some of the other regional championships. So there is definitely, if you set yourself up effectively through nationals and plan out, you can achieve those points that are required to get there. At the end of the day, if you go to a Diamond League, you still got to place highly to get points. So, going to a gold or a silver or bronze, you may be able to pick up more points there than you would going to a Diamond League finishing 10th, so it's not always the best approach to getting your points. And, with only coaching road athletes now, I mean, it's a little bit less stressful, but when planning things out with Matt Clark to try to chase selection, and my goodness, did he give us some last ditch efforts to get in a selectable position. It's a complex map of world rankings, points calculations and things like that. And we'd be finishing races and straight away chucking the grade of the race, the position, the time, and trying to work out the points, go, okay, what's his average now? And okay, where does that sit? It was last year we were so confident that he was going to make the world champs because he was so well placed on world rankings. And then he goes and pushes the pace in a race in Belgium and drags everyone to a really fast race. And it ends up being the one event that I think only one non-automatic qualifier gets in. And poor old Ben Buckingham runs 8:15 and still doesn't get selected, because he doesn't fit within the quota. So, at the end of the day, you got to just put your best attempt forward to picking up those points, achieving those standards, and making yourself eligible. So until it gets to that point, I don't know that we're at a disadvantage. It just means we have to be aware of that for our planning. Yeah, and I think that's coaches need to take that responsibility to have a good awareness of how those points interact. And I've certainly, through my role, helped to educate a number of coaches to sit down, go through the points where they could potentially collect some. Because I work in the pathway space, I'm dealing with coaches and athletes who are having to interact with that for the very first time. And so it's a real mystery for them at that point, and to help give them some clarity on that, it's good when when the plan comes off for them.
Yeah. Hey, Adam, this has been fantastic, 75 minutes. Loved every second of it. But what's one question I should have asked you? What have I missed? What are people going to go, Brady had Adam on for 75 minutes and he didn't ask him about that? Is there something like one of these technical terms somewhere that I should have been like, hey, maybe I should have, what about training intensity distribution? So so when I read this in your document, low, medium and high, we're talking about like percentages of heart rate, or you're talking about paces?
Yeah, so that's interesting because it really depends on how you calculate it. So when I came across this more when I was doing analysis around Jess's Australian marathon record. And so it'd be unfair of me or inaccurate for me to say that it's been a guiding principle, but it's certainly something I've started to focus in on a lot more when I've been planning out things for Haftu in recent times. So I'm just trying to actually...
I've got the numbers here. So, go for it. Jess's low was 77%, 18% medium and 5% high, whereas Haftu was 69% low, 24% medium, 8% high.
Yeah. So
and I think that's good for the listeners out there as well. That so I'm reading that as like, hey, 77% of Jess's weeks are chilled, easy jogging. Heart rate's pretty low.
So I guess the first thing there is, how's it calculated? I've tried to get it to calculate off of heart rate as much as possible, and in line with the zones that we've picked up from the lab testing. But initially I did it based off of RPE, so rate of perceived exertion. So on every training session, every run, I put an RPE for the athletes to guide them, just so they've got a better awareness of, I guess, how... what's the style and design of that training session. So as I started viewing this, I then came across some research articles, and I think it came up with the gold standard was for low at 75 to 80%, for medium was 10 to 15, and for high it was 5 to 10. And so Jess fit in with 77, 18, and 5. And I think Haftu wasn't too far off that. But off of learning about that from Jess's race, I actually started putting into Haftu's spreadsheet a live tracker for this. So as I'd pump his training data in, it would start to come up with what the last 4 weeks was and what the last 8 weeks was of training intensity distribution for Haftu. I mean, it's probably what I've learnt a lot of the time when looking at some of this physiological stuff. It's there to give us a better understanding of what we're doing and why does it work. Because a lot of us come with experiential learning that sort of gives us a model of what we try to follow. The TID actually started to give me a rationale to go, okay, well, we're getting the right balance here, because it's aligning with some research, which is a nice validation to have, but how true is it across? So I'll learn more about that interaction with marathon programming as I continue to implement and track it as I go. So again, as I said to you previously, it's just my curiosity to go, what can I look at to give me a better metric of what we do going forward. And I tried doing this many, many years ago as a coach. And I was regularly in contact with Steve Magnus, who's a physiologist in the US. We met back in 2013 at the World Champs in Moscow, because he had an athlete on the Australian team. And I said to him, I'm currently trying to measure all the intensities of the athletes that I coach, and trying to come up with what's a perfect sort of model to peak, so I can replicate it 10 weeks out. And he goes, oh, go give that a go and let me know how you go with that. And I got about 6 or 7 weeks into it, maybe not even that long. And it was driving me nuts trying to do all these calculations constantly. And he said, and I gave him a call and we were having a chat. He goes, how'd you find that? I said, I gave up on it. He said, why'd you give up on it? I said, because I'm never going to have an athlete enter into the last 10 weeks of a prep in exactly the same way. So to be able to say, I'm going to dial in and here's your exact last 10 weeks of preparation, and it delivered results once, so it's going to do it again. And there's just 10 weeks of management there. Like I can't control if someone gets kept up all night because the dog next door was barking, or their relationship broke down and so they're stressed and can't sleep, or they're not eating well enough because of this or that or whatever have you. So we cannot replicate the exact environment for that final 10 weeks to take place. So that's why, when we look at TID, it's a good bit of feedback. Are we getting the right percentage of work in? But I'm sure I'll learn, and I don't think I'd get exactly the same percentage for Jess again in the future, because I'm not just going to roll out the exact same training. We'll tweak it, we'll adjust it, she'll interact with it in different ways. And it may be that, she starts developing a niggle and we have to rely on some lower intensity stuff and manage. But it'll certainly be fascinating as we go on into the future to keep tracking some of those things.
Yeah, more data for you. Hey, thanks, Adam. Once again, congratulations on all the success you've had. I can't wait to, keep tracking, Jess, when she comes back because she's come back twice pretty successfully. One maternity leave, she come back and won the Commonwealth Games gold. The other one, she come back and broke the Australian record. So times 3 is going to be interesting. And then sky's the limit.
Yeah, look, I mean, Jess is still wildly motivated to get back running, but she's very aware that being a mother comes first. That's something I definitely support. So we'll do what we can, but I would definitely have a higher level of optimism of her coming back again. And there's some pretty exciting opportunities ahead, and I'm looking forward to what he can do. And I'm just enjoying seeing a guy like that give it a crack. I think he's just got so much to give this sport in Australia, and hopefully he can repay all the support that he's been given.
I just want to end this episode with a quick shout out to Nomio. After trying it in my own training, I'm convinced, and every elite athlete I follow also seems to be on it. Using it before hard sessions or races is a game changer, and I can't imagine doing one now without broccoli in my veins. You can find out more for yourself at drinknomio.com.
Doesn't matter if it don't come back. Under pressure.